to say the least, Ben, it's a complicated structure, right? These aren't really Chinese firms listed in the U.S. These are shell corporations in some gorgeous Caribbean paradise that have the right to receive some revenue from Chinese investors and pass money back in exchange for the right to receive some investment from U.S. investors and pass some of those revenues back. It's really complicated.
Yeah, and I think from speaking with the SEC chair, I think that they would, the regulators here would really like it to be explained as you just did. I think there's a genuine question here with the regulators you speak to in Washington, and we spoke with SEC Chair Gary Gensler today about this issue. And the point being that when an American investor is putting money into a Chinese firm or firm or company that's based in Hong Kong, in reality, yes, they are often investing in a shell company based in a place like the Cayman Islands. And the issue is that that's not disclosed as well as it should be, according to regulators. That's one of the issues that U.S. regulators have been raising with Chinese firms. Another one really dates back almost 2 decades, and that involves the work papers, the financial audits of these firms. There's, going back to 2002, a law in the United States that publicly traded companies, their books, essentially, their financial audits have to be inspected by U.S. regulators. And Chinese companies have refused to let that happen. Their auditors essentially saying that Beijing won't let that happen on national security grounds. So those 2 issues are really playing out in a heightened way, particularly over the last year. This became a bipartisan issue at the tail end of the Trump administration, and now it's carrying over into the Biden administration and at the SEC with Chair Gary Gensler.
Ben, it's curious, too, as I go through your story and your conversation with Gensler, he talks about regulatory risk, which obviously we need to be aware of as investors, but political risk. I have a hard time believing that an investor doesn't realize there's a considerable amount of political risk when you talk about being an American investor and Chinese names.
Yeah, I think that's correct. Although I think what the SEC is pointing to is that over the past couple months in particular, there's been what you could call a clampdown or crackdown on specific sectors in China. And I think what the SEC is saying and what they've said in previous statements and also to us in our interview is that there's really a desire for even more information. At the end of the day, in the United States, the SEC, on top of capital markets and as Wall Street's main regulator, is really about disclosure. And the issue that they're raising is that Chinese companies, be it the corporate structure, be it the political risk, be it the regulatory risk, American investors just don't have that information that regulators in Washington want them to have.
Or read it. Or read. I mean, Ben, the thing is, if you go back and look at DD's prospectus, it's 102 pages. It's definitely college-level English, or maybe even graduate level, if there is such a thing. And it's written in a very, boring print format. I think it seems like what Gary Gensler wants, and probably because the prices of these things have fallen, so American investors are angry, is, block letters in crayon on 1 page, because this stuff is there. It's just that investors haven't taken the time to properly digest it. And to be fair, it's, as I said at the top, very complicated stuff. I think he just wants it to be very simplified and clear.
Yeah, I think the other issue for Chair Gensler is that in some cases, the corporate structure, the shell companies that we were talking about in the beginning, based in the Cayman Islands or elsewhere, the idea that you're investing in not exactly the operating company in China, but a company that has a relationship with that operating company is something that in particular is something that they don't feel has been disclosed purposefully. Certainly, I think regulators, here have long had issue with the idea that, things are not disclosed perhaps as clearly as they should be. I don't know if that's only for Chinese issuers, though. I mean, some of these prospectuses and some of the language you see from issuers right here in the United States are also pretty confusing and written in a pretty complicated way.